Growing up as the youngest of 3 siblings, I always felt like the odd one out. My 2 older sisters, Sarah and Leah, were incredibly close. From the moment I was old enough to remember, it was as if they shared a secret world that I could never be a part of. Their bond seemed unbreakable, the kind you see in TV shows where sisters finish each other's sentences and have inside jokes. But in my case, their closeness wasn't a heartwarming connection. It was a barrier, one that left me isolated and rejected. It didn't take long for me to realize that being a boy was the root of the problem. I was the only boy in the house besides my dad, and that alone seemed to offend Sarah and Leah. They made no effort to hide their disappointment that I wasn't another sister. From the time I was old enough to want to play with them, I was met with cruel remarks. They would say things like, "We wanted another sister, not a brother," or "Boys are gross." These weren't the kind of playful sibling jabs you might expect. There was real venom in their words. They excluded me from everything, enforcing a strict, "no boys allowed" rule in the house. It wasn't just that they didn't want to play with me. It went deeper than that. They seemed genuinely disgusted by my presence. They'd say things like, "Boys are dirty, boys are stupid," and "boys ruin everything." These comments were relentless, and every time I tried to join in on their games or simply ask to be included, I was shot down with remarks like, "Ew, go away," or "Why don't you go play with your gross boy toys?" I wasn't a hyperactive or annoying little brother. I was just a kid eager to spend time with my sisters, but they made it clear I wasn't welcome in their world. As a young child, this rejection cut deep. It felt like I was being punished for something completely beyond my control, being born a boy. I couldn't understand why my own sisters seemed to hate me so much. Their disdain wasn't just casual or occasional, it was constant. It wasn't long before my parents began to notice the tension between us. Every now and then, they'd step in and punish my sisters for being cruel, but the punishments never seemed to change anything. Sarah and Leah would just get more careful about when and how they said hurtful things. Things got so bad that my parents eventually decided we all needed therapy. Not just family therapy, but individual therapy for each of us. I think they hoped my sisters would learn to accept me, or at the very least, stop being so openly cruel. But therapy didn't seem to make a difference, at least not for them. In fact, I'll never forget one of our family sessions where Sarah and Leah bluntly stated that they didn't see me as their brother. They even went so far as to say that they would never love me and wished I would just disappear forever. They talked about how disgusting boys were and how they wished they never had to see me again. My parents were devastated, and I could see how much it hurt them to hear their daughters speak this way about their son. But what could they do? You can't force someone to care. After that session, our family therapy session started to fade away. It was clear that Sarah and Leah weren't interested in changing, and my parents, while heartbroken, didn't know how to fix the situation. Instead, they turned their focus to me. They worked hard to make sure I had other outlets, friends, hobbies, activities, so that I wouldn't feel completely isolated at home. And it helped, to a degree. I found things that made me happy and gave me a sense of belonging outside of my family, but that didn't change the fact that deep down, I still wanted my sisters to care. As the years went by, not much changed. Sarah and Leah remained best friends, and I remained the unwanted little brother. The only difference was that, by the time I hit my teenage years, I had given up on trying to win their approval. I built my own life, found my own friends, and stopped hoping for some magical moment where they'd suddenly accept me. My parents kept trying to repair the damage, but eventually, even they had to let go. They realized, just as I had, that my sisters weren't going to change. Their bond with each other was ironclad, and there was no room for me in it. When Sarah got married during my high school years, I wasn't at all surprised that I wasn't involved in the wedding planning. I wasn't in the bridal party, I wasn't asked to help with anything, and I didn't get any say in anything. I wasn't even treated like a guest at the wedding, I was just there, more out of obligation than anything else. And when both Sarah and Leah started having kids, the story remained the same. I wasn't sent any birth announcements, wasn't invited to meet their babies, nothing. It was as though I didn't exist to them. Even on social media, where you'd think there would be some level of family connection, Sarah and Leah made it clear I wasn't a part of their lives. Both of them had their accounts set to private, and I wasn't given permission to follow them. It was like they'd gone out of their way to create a boundary between us, and I've accepted it. I'm 24 now, and while it hurts to admit it, I no longer see them as part of my family either. After all these years, I've come to terms with the fact that we're not really siblings in any meaningful sense. So imagine my surprise a few months ago when both Sarah and Leah came to me with a request. They both have kids now, and apparently, they've been struggling to balance work and childcare. They'd been sharing a nanny and babysitter, but they were tired of the expense. So, out of the blue, they approached me, the brother they'd excluded from their lives for as long as I can remember, and asked if I'd be willing to babysit their kids. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. After years of being treated like an outsider, they suddenly wanted my help? I was shocked. They said something along the lines of, "You should help out because we're family," as if suddenly pulling the family card made up for everything they'd put me through. I just stared at them in disbelief, trying to process the audacity of it all. When they confirmed they were serious, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. After 24 years of being treated like I didn't belong, they now expected me to help raise their children? It was laughable. I flat out told them there was no way I would babysit for them. They were shocked, as if I was the one being unreasonable. They called me selfish, saying I had a bad attitude for not helping them when they were in need. Selfish? After everything they'd done to make me feel like I didn't matter, they had the nerve to call me selfish. I didn't hold back. I told them to take care of their own kids and reminded them of how they'd spent our entire lives making it clear they didn't want me around. Now, they expected me to drop everything and help them out just because it was convenient for them? No way. They didn't like that answer. They accused me of being just as bad as they were for refusing to help. But honestly, I don't care anymore. I'm over it. If they think I'm a terrible person for not wanting to be their backup babysitter, so be it. I don't owe them anything, and they can figure out their own childcare problems. Maybe they should have thought about how they treated me before coming to me for help. A week after that confrontation, I thought the whole situation was behind me. I figured they'd either find someone else to watch their kids or go back to paying for a nanny like they'd been doing before. But apparently, that wasn't the end of it. My mom called me up one day and asked if I could come over for dinner. Nothing unusual about that. My relationship with my parents has always been decent despite everything with my sisters, so I didn't think much of it. I assumed it would be a normal family dinner where we'd catch up on life and maybe chat about work. But when I got there, something felt off. My mom was being overly cheerful, making small talk that felt forced, and my dad barely acknowledged me when I walked in. The whole vibe was strange, but I tried not to read too much into it. After dinner, my mom asked if we could have a chat. Again, not completely out of the ordinary, but her tone made me uneasy. We sat down in the living room, and she gave me this long, thoughtful look, like she was trying to figure out how to say something difficult. Finally, she spoke, "I've been hearing from your sisters." Instantly, my heart sank. I knew exactly where this conversation was heading. She continued, explaining that Sarah and Leah were upset because I'd refused to help with their kids. She didn't understand why I'd said no, especially since they'd never asked for help like this before. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sarah and Leah, the same sisters who spent my entire childhood making me feel like I didn't belong, were now upset because I wouldn't babysit their kids? It was almost too much to process. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom," I began, my voice tight with frustration, "you know what my relationship with Sarah and Leah has been like. They've never treated me like family. Not once. It's like they went out of their way to exclude me, even as adults. I wasn't invited to Sarah's wedding. I didn't even know when they had their kids until I heard it through someone else. They don't let me follow them on social media, for God's sake. And now, suddenly, they want me to step in and help with their kids like we're one big happy family? How am I supposed to forget everything that happened and just act like none of it matters?" My mom sighed, nodding, though I could tell she wasn't entirely on my side. "I get it. I really do," she said, her tone soft but still hinting at something I didn't want to hear. "But don't you think this could be an opportunity to start fresh? Maybe this is their way of trying to make amends. They're reaching out, and I think that counts for something. They're not perfect, but they're your sisters. Family should help each other." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, disbelieving laugh that escaped before I could stop it. "They're not reaching out to make amends, Mom," I snapped. "They're reaching out because they need something. They don't care about fixing our relationship or being close. They just don't want to pay for child care anymore, and they see me as a free option. That's all this is." My mom frowned, clearly not buying my side of things. "Well, maybe that's how it seems to you," she said gently, "but the fact is, they made the first move. They asked you for help. That couldn't have been easy for them. I think they were hoping you'd meet them halfway. They're both working moms, under a lot of stress, and this could be a chance for you all to move forward." And there it was, the same old argument I'd heard my entire life. Family should help each other. It was something that always came up, especially when Sarah and Leah treated me horribly and Mom tried to smooth things over. But here's the truth, family doesn't treat each other the way they've treated me. Family doesn't exclude you for years and then expect everything to be fine just because they suddenly need something. I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom spoke again, and what she said made my blood boil. "They told me you were really rude to them when they asked for help," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. They said you rolled your eyes and made it clear you weren't interested. That's not like you. I raised you to be better than that. I snapped. Rude. I spat, unable to control the heat in my voice. I was the one being rude after everything they've done to me? Mom, I didn't even exist to them for years. They made that perfectly clear. Now, just because I won't drop everything to be their free babysitter, I'm the bad guy? That's bullshit, and you know it. My mom looked taken aback, as though she hadn't expected me to lash out like that. I'm not saying they've been perfect, she said quietly, but they're trying now. I think it's worth considering that people change. They grow up. Maybe they're reaching out because they want to start including you. I shook my head, the anger simmering just beneath my skin. If they wanted to include me, they would have done it long before they needed me for something, I said. They wouldn't have waited until they were desperate for help. This isn't about family or rebuilding a relationship. It's about convenience. They're only asking because they don't want to pay a sitter anymore. My mom sighed again, heavier this time, her voice full of weariness. They're still your sisters, she said softly. We're all family. At the end of the day, that's what matters most. I just don't want you to waste this opportunity. They came to me after you said no, and they're really hurt by it. They think you're holding a grudge over something that happened when you were kids. That was the breaking point. I shot up from the couch, my frustration boiling over. Mom, this isn't just about something that happened when we were kids. This has been going on our whole lives. They've never treated me like family, and I'm not going to pretend everything's fine just because they suddenly need something from me. I'm done. For a moment, my mom said nothing. She just sat there, looking at me with this heartbreaking mix of disappointment and sadness. I could see it in her eyes, she was torn. She understood where I was coming from, but she also wanted everything to just go back to normal. To smooth things over with Sarah and Leah. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not this time. I had spent too many years being the outcast in my own family, and I wasn't about to let them guilt-trip me into helping now. After that tense conversation, I figured things would settle down. Sarah and Leah weren't the type to suddenly start caring about making amends. Their only concern was finding someone to watch their kids for free, and once they realized I wasn't budging, I thought they'd move on. At least, that's what I told myself. A few days passed with no texts, no calls, nothing from either of them. I wasn't surprised. They'd always been the type to write me off when things didn't go their way, and I doubted they would chase after me now. Honestly, I was relieved. I didn't want their drama or their fake attempts at reconciliation. But then, something strange happened. One night, as I was scrolling through Instagram, mindlessly liking posts and replying to messages, I got a notification that made me do a double take. Sarah had followed me. For a moment, my brain couldn't process it. Sarah, my sister, the same sister who made it crystal clear for years that she wanted nothing to do with me, was now following me? I clicked on her profile, half expecting it to be a mistake, but there it was, her account, suddenly public. No more private settings, no more lockdown profile. I could see everything. Her posts, her stories, all of it. And there, staring me in the face, was a family photo she had posted just a few hours earlier. It was a picture of her kids and Lee's kids at some kind of family gathering. I wasn't invited, of course, but the fact that she was letting me see this? It was odd, to say the least. Before I could even make sense of it, another notification popped up. Leah had followed me, too. Now I was really confused. These were the same women who had blocked me from their lives for as long as I could remember. And now they were following me on social media like everything was fine? Like we were one big happy family? My gut reaction was to assume it was some kind of mistake. Maybe they accidentally made their accounts public and didn't realize I could see their posts. But before I could dwell on it, a direct message popped up on my screen. It was from Sarah. Hey, the message read, now that you can follow us and see our lives, I think it's time we move past all the old stuff. We're family, after all, and it would mean a lot if you could help us out with the kids. You don't even know your nieces and nephews, and this could be a great way to bond. I stared at the message in disbelief, my stomach twisting in knots. The audacity was unreal. They'd spent years excluding me, making me feel like an outsider, and now, because they'd hit the follow button on Instagram, I was supposed to forget everything? Just like that? As if that wasn't bad enough, another DM appeared. This time, from Leah. Hey bro, it began, I'm sure you saw we made our accounts public. I'm glad you can finally see what's been going on in our lives. Look, I know things haven't always been great between us, but it's time we start acting like family. Sarah and I could really use your help with the kids. You're their uncle, and family helps family. Plus, now that you can follow us, it's clear we want you involved. I sat there, staring at my phone, completely floored. They thought that following me on Instagram and making their accounts public was some grand gesture of reconciliation? As if that erased years of cruelty and exclusion? It was laughable. For a few minutes, I debated how to respond. Part of me wanted to unleash all the pent-up anger I'd held onto for so long. I wanted to tell them exactly what I thought of their sudden change of heart and how hollow it all felt. But another part of me knew that engaging with them would only give them more power. They didn't deserve my time, let alone my anger. So, I left them on read. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a response. They made their choice all those years ago, and now they had to live with it. Making their accounts public didn't change a thing. It didn't erase the years of exclusion or the pain they caused. In the days that followed, I noticed they started posting more family stories, tagging each other in posts as if to rub it in my face that they were still close, and I wasn't part of it. It was